It was late afternoon in Portland, Oregon, and the sun was laying a warm gold across my kitchen floor. I had just poured myself a cup of tea when my phone buzzed on the counter. The message from my daughter was short and sharp. "Don't come to my wedding. You're no longer my family." I stood there holding the phone, the steam from my tea rising between us like a fragile wall. For a moment, I could only hear the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock over the pantry door. The words felt heavy, like they had weight enough to knock the breath out of me. My name is Florence Harper. I am 64 years old, a widow for 12 years, and I live in a small craftsman house just outside the city. I worked for decades as a senior accountant in a construction firm, kept the books balanced and the numbers honest. These days I make ends meet on my pension and a few shifts a week at the public library. I have learned to live simply, and until now I thought I was content. That was before my own child told me I was no longer hers. The message pulled me back to the conversation we had just a few days ago. Samantha had shown up without calling, her shiny new SUV still ticking in the driveway from the drive over. She came into my kitchen with the scent of expensive perfume clinging to her coat and said she needed $30,000 for her wedding in Napa Valley. She spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if I could just reach into a drawer and pull it out. I told her I could give her $8,000. And even that would take a careful shuffle of my savings. That number barely passed my lips before her eyes narrowed. $8,000 is nothing, she said. Gregory's parents are paying for the venue, the flowers, the band. A real mother would find a way. Her words cut sharper than I expected. I had heard about the Whitmores, Gregory's family owners of a chain of resorts, and well known for their wealth. They had bought her that SUV for an engagement gift. Now she was standing in my kitchen comparing me to them, as if decades of being her mother could be outweighed by their bank account. I told her I could not give her more. It was almost half my retirement money I would need for the years ahead. She rolled her eyes and said she did not want to have this conversation again. Then she walked out, heels clicking across my porch, the sound fading as the SUV pulled away. I stood at the window, the steam from my tea gone cold, and watched her drive off. 28 years of being her mother, and it felt like she had erased me in a single afternoon. I turned toward the living room where my husband's photograph sat on the mantel. Peter had been gone 12 years, but the kindness in his eyes never faded in that picture. I remembered him telling me once back when we were both still young and thought time was endless, that when the truth is on your side, time will bring it to light. I ran my fingers along the frame, feeling the weight of those words. They felt different now, heavier, as if they were asking something of me. The kitchen was dimming as the sun slid lower, the golden light turning to a cooler shade. I set my tea aside and walked to the small desk by the window. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I scrolled through the contacts until I found a name I had not spoken aloud in years. Evelyn Brooks. She had been a friend long before life pulled us in different directions. Years ago, she worked as a financial investigator, the kind of person who could follow a paper trail to its very end. I had once helped her out of a tangle with a dishonest client, and she had told me then that if I ever needed anything, I only had to call. I sat there with my thumb over her name, listening to the evening sounds of the neighborhood. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and fell silent. A car door slammed, then the muffled sound of an engine starting. My heart beat steady, not fast. This was not a decision made in anger. It was something colder, clearer. I pressed the call button and lifted the phone to my ear. As it rang, I knew the next chapter of this story had already begun, even if Samantha did not see it coming yet. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand, the last of the afternoon light pooling on the wood in front of me. My tea was still warm, the steam curling slowly upward, carrying the faint scent of chamomile. I stared at Evelyn Brooks's name on the screen for a long moment before pressing the call button. The last time I had spoken to her was 15 years ago, when she was caught in a trap set by a crooked investment advisor. I had seen the irregularities in her paperwork and convinced her to pull her money before it vanished. She told me then that she owed me, and that someday she would repay the favor. The line clicked and her voice came through a little older, but still carrying that sharp confidence I remembered. "Florence," she said, "I haven't heard from you in years. What's going on?" I took a slow breath and told her I needed a full background check on the Whitmore family. I want every detail on their finances, assets, and business dealings. The words came out steady, with none of the tremor I had felt just a day ago. This wasn't about feelings anymore. This was about facts. There was a pause. "Florence." "That's heavy work," she said. "What's the reason I sipped my tea and let the warmth steady me? Let's just say I have reason to believe they are not what they seem." She was quiet for a moment, then I could hear the faint creak of her chair as she leaned back. "You saved me once. I won't forget that." "All right, I'll take it. But this kind of investigation isn't quick." "How long?" I asked. "1 week for a thorough job," she replied. "I'll need a $2,500 retainer." I nodded to myself. "That's fine. It will come from my savings. I want this done right." She agreed, and we settled the details. She would start first thing in the morning, working her way through public records, corporate filings, and whatever else she could find. When the call ended, I set the phone down and wrapped my hands around my teacup. Outside, the sky was shifting to a cooler shade, the first hints of evening sliding across the street. I looked out the window at the quiet houses and the bare branches swaying gently in the wind. My heart no longer felt heavy. It felt anchored. The first step had been taken, and now the waiting began. But I was no longer waiting to be hurt. I was waiting for the truth, and I intended to use it. 3 days later, Evelyn showed up at my door just after lunch, a manila folder tucked under her arm. She stepped inside without ceremony, set the folder on my kitchen table, and slid into the chair across from me. "You should see this," she said, her tone flat, but carrying an edge that made my stomach tighten. I pulled the folder closer and opened it. The first page was a summary. Gregory Whitmore and his parents were moving large amounts of unreported income through their resorts and a network of event companies that did not actually exist. I turned each page slowly. There were invoices from catering services with elegant names, all billed for tens of thousands of dollars, yet none of them had legitimate business records. One company listed an address that was an empty lot. Another had a phone number that led to a disconnected line. Bank statements showed deposits of $50,000 and $60,000 at odd intervals, always in cash, never tied to a traceable client. The paper trail was tidy on the surface, but to someone like me, it was glaringly false. Evelyn leaned back and crossed her arms. "This is just the preliminary pull from public filings and a few discreet calls. If I dig deeper, I'll find more." My eyes lingered on a photograph she had clipped to one page. It was the Whitmores at a ribbon cutting for one of their new properties. All smiles and charm, the picture of success. Samantha had posted that very photo online a week ago, with a caption calling them her real parents. The words echoed in my head, sour and bitter. I closed the folder and kept my hand on it as if holding it down would keep the truth from spilling across my kitchen. My daughter had chosen these people because of what they could give her. Money, gifts, a lifestyle I could never offer. And now I knew exactly what that lifestyle was built on. Evelyn was still talking about next steps, but my mind was already moving ahead. I stood and carried the folder to my desk, setting it neatly beside my ledger. If she chose them for their money, she'll learn where that money comes from. My voice was calm when I said it, but inside a new kind of resolve had taken root. This was no longer just about a wedding. This was about showing her the truth in a way she could never ignore. The Whitmore Resort in Napa Valley looked like something from a glossy travel magazine. The sun was sliding toward the horizon, turning the vineyards into a wash of gold and shadow. Strings of lights hung between white columns, and the air carried the scent of roses and expensive wine. Guests moved in clusters across the manicured lawn, their clothes as polished as the marble walkways. A string quartet played softly, the notes floating just above the sound of laughter. An usher led me to my seat in the third row. In front of me sat the Whitmore family, and a line of their business associates, all perfectly dressed and perfectly pleased with themselves. I did not know most of their faces, but their body language told me they belonged to the same world. I sat down, placing my handbag carefully on my lap. Inside was the leather envelope, its weight small but certain. My fingers brushed it through the fabric, and I reminded myself why I was here. The music shifted, and the guests rose. Gregory appeared first, tall and smiling, his tuxedo crisp against the fading light. Beside him was Samantha, her dress a sweep of ivory silk that caught the glow of the sunset. Her arm was looped through Margaret Whitmore's, the woman holding her hand with the warmth and possession of a mother who believed she owned the moment. They walked slowly down the aisle, smiles fixed for the cameras that clicked from both sides. From where I stood, I could see the way Samantha leaned toward Margaret, whispering something that made them both smile. The image was perfect for anyone who did not know better. But I knew. I knew about the fake invoices and the shell companies. I knew about the cash deposits timed to avoid suspicion. Every petal in the rose arrangements and every drop of champagne in those crystal flutes had been paid for with money that was never theirs to keep. I sat when the others sat, my eyes on Samantha as she took her place at the front. Around me, the guests shifted in their chairs, the setting sun casting long shadows across the aisle. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, steady but strong. This was their stage, dressed in gold and glass, and they thought the story would end the way they planned. The truth in my handbag said otherwise. I kept my back straight and my gaze forward, waiting for the right moment to open the next chapter. The reception hall shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers. The tables were covered in white linen and gold-rimmed china, each centerpiece a tower of roses and orchids. Laughter mixed with the clink of glasses as servers moved between tables with trays of champagne. I sat quietly at my assigned seat, watching Samantha glide from guest to guest in her silk gown. When she reached my table, she spotted the leather envelope I had placed beside her plate. She picked it up with a curious smile. "What is this?" I told her it was a gift she should open now in front of everyone. The room was warm with the hum of conversation, but when she slid her finger under the flap, the sound seemed to fade. She pulled out a single sheet of paper first. My handwriting was clear. For you to know who your real family truly is. Beneath the note was a neat stack of documents. Her eyes moved over the first page, then the next. I saw the moment her breath caught. The papers detailed bank records, fake catering invoices, and property transfers that had never been reported. A guest at the next table leaned over to look. Another pulled out a phone and snapped a photo. The murmur began small at first, then spreading like a ripple. People were leaning across tables, passing their phones to show each other what they had just seen. I rose from my chair and spoke clearly. This wedding was paid for with stolen money. Every head turned toward me. Margaret Whitmore's smile froze. Richard straightened in his seat, his voice rising in denial. That is a lie. My family has worked hard for everything we have. I did not move. The evidence is in her hands. Look for yourself. Guests were already scrolling through images that had been texted across the room. Gregory's eyes met mine across the table. He did not speak. There was something in his expression that was not anger. It was closer to unease, maybe even guilt. Margaret's voice broke the silence again, demanding that Samantha hand over the papers. Samantha's hands trembled, the pages slipping slightly in her grip. Around us, the conversation swelled, phones clicking as the story leapt from one table to another. The music had stopped, but the air was full of noise. I stood still, letting the scene unfold. The Whitmores could deny it all they wanted. The truth was already moving through that room faster than they could contain it, and nothing would put it back in the envelope. 3 days after the wedding, I heard a knock at my door just after lunch. When I opened it, Samantha stood there with red eyes and her hair pulled back in a loose knot. She was holding 2 large shopping bags, their glossy handles cutting into her fingers. Inside were the diamond earrings, the silk shawl, the designer purse, all the gifts the Whitmores had showered her with. She set them on my coffee table and sat down without waiting to be asked. I am so sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I listened as she admitted she had been blinded by the life they offered her. She thought it was security, but now she could only see how fragile it was. Then she told me something I had not expected. Gregory knew his parents were doing things that would catch up to them. He wanted the wedding to happen quickly, so I would be part of it before the investigation closed in. He had planned to leave with her afterward to separate from them before it was too late. For the first time, I saw that not everyone on their side of the aisle was rotten to the core. We sat together for a long while, the bags of returned gifts between us. She asked if we could still have a ceremony, but just for the people who truly cared. No resort, no 100-guest list, no gold-trimmed plates. I said yes. We would do it in the backyard with real friends and real family, the kind that show up without needing an invitation, the kind that stay when things get hard. Before she left, she hugged me the way she used to when she was little, with her face pressed into my shoulder. I told her that forgiveness was not forgetting. It was choosing to move forward with eyes open. She nodded and carried the bags to her car, saying she would take them to a charity shop. After she drove away, I went to my desk and closed the folder that had started it all. The investigation was now in the hands of the IRS, and I had no doubt they would do their part. I slid the old family album back into the cabinet, my fingers lingering on the spine. Outside, the winter light was fading, but in my chest there was a quiet warmth. Some endings are not about revenge. They are about finally having the truth and knowing what to do with it.